When we took a look at the NFL teams with the easiest slate of offensive opponents, we said we would be doing the same in a lot of other categories as well. We continue upon that path today as we now look at the NFL teams with the hardest slate of regular season offensive opponents during the regular season. How are we going to do that? Through the use of C-Score, of course. C-Score is this channel's metric that evaluates all aspects of an NFL team beyond just blindly looking at its record. C-Score is also broken down into offensive and defensive components in order to create a list such as this one. If you're interested in a more thorough breakdown over how C-Score works, be sure to check out the description of this video. It's all very simple here. We just take the average offensive C-score of every opponent on a team's schedule. Played 14 games against a combined score of 84, that's an average of 6. 16 games against a combined 88 is an average of 5.5. You get the idea. Wanted to take a moment to thank you for joining us today. Give us a like, a few shares, subscribe to the channel, and ding that notification bell. Let's get this party started. That party will start right here at number 25 with the 2007 Philadelphia Eagles. In a decade of very good Eagles teams, this was another one despite only going 8-8. That C-score of 10.688 tells us a better story. A quick reminder on how this breakdown works. Since we're looking at who faced the hardest offensive opponents, we're going to be looking at each of these teams' defensive C-score, which for Philadelphia is 12.094. They faced off against teams such as the New England Patriots, who of course were undefeated this season. Their offensive C-score that year was 36.453, and their overall C-score was 49.893. That's how the rest of these numbers are going to look. Now, they did face three different teams, the Bills, the Jets, and the Dolphins, the other teams from the AFC East that had negative double-digit offensive C-scores. However, that matchup with the Patriots, 2 with the Cowboys, and 1 with the Packers, among others, gives the Eagles, on average, a very strong slate of opponents. The average offensive C-score for those opponents this season was 5.24. Coming up next at number 24 are the 1979 Houston Oilers. They put up an 11-5 record this season, but only outscored their opponents by 31 points. A tough strength of schedule is what keeps their C-score in the double digits at 10.792. This Houston team was mostly offense, with their defensive C-score coming in at 2.522. They did have the toughest of all teams from 1979 sitting right in their division. The Pittsburgh Steelers put up an offensive C-score of more than 21 points this year, and Houston had to face them twice. They had another opponent in the Seattle Seahawks at double digits. The only double-digit negative team they faced were the Kansas City Chiefs. They only faced 2 opponents all season that were lower than -2. In total, the average opponent for the Oilers this season kicks in at 5.275. In the season before they broke out to win the Super Bowl, the 1998 St. Louis Rams will occupy spot number 23. This will be one of the better 4-12 teams you're ever going to see, keeping their point differential in the negative double digits while facing the league's toughest schedule. Their C-score was negative 8.91, and their defensive unit was the stronger of the two, coming in at negative 1.883. Look at their hardest opponents here. This represents 5 different games, 2 each within the division against both the Atlanta Falcons and the San Francisco 49ers, along with the juggernaut record-breaking Minnesota Vikings. The only thing keeping this ranking for the Rams from being even higher is this matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles and their near negative 29 offensive C-score. On the whole, the average opponent for the Rams this year had an offensive C-score of 5.396. A franchise known for having some bad luck, our number 22 entry are the 1979 Cleveland Browns. They look perfectly average on paper, just over 500, a single-digit positive point differential, but the 9th highest scoring team in the league along with the 3rd hardest strength of schedule. That does give them a positive C-score of 6.405. Their defensive C-score will keep them slightly below average here at negative 0.816. However, like the Oilers 2 spots on the countdown before them, they had the Steelers in their division, as well as a matchup with the Seahawks and the Raiders. The Kansas City Chiefs were their only opponent at negative double digits. Stop me if you've heard that before. All told, the Browns' schedule here is slightly harder than the Oilers, with their average opponent coming through with a 5.406. One season after putting up one of the NFL's most horrific seasons, the 1977 New York Jets take spot number 21 here with a slightly less horrific season. Part of that was the fact that they won 3 games with only a negative 109 point differential alongside a top 10 strength of schedule. Still a bad team though, with their C-score of negative 18.938. On the defensive side, they were slightly better, putting up a defensive C-score of negative 7.341. They did face some pretty tough offenses this season, including the Oakland Raiders, the Houston Oilers, and 2 matchups with the Miami Dolphins. They were slightly saved, actually more than slightly saved, by getting to face off with the Buffalo Bills twice this season. Otherwise, their 3rd easiest opponent was the New Orleans Saints, and their C-score only just clears negative 1. Altogether now, the average opponent for this season's New York Jets comes in at 5.442. We opened the top 20 as we opened the top 25 with a 21st century team. This would be the 2011 Chicago Bears. Also on paper, just super average looking here. 8-8, outscoring their opponents by fewer than 1 point per game. Average ranks in points scored and points allowed. Strength of schedule gives them a boost, giving them a C-score of 3.086, explaining this 6.949 defensive C-score. They had 2 matchups against powerful offenses just within their division in the Detroit Lions and the 15-1 glass cannon Green Bay Packers, not to mention a matchup with the New Orleans Saints and their near 25-point score in offensive C-score. The Bears had one little saving grace on their schedule this year as they got to face off with the Kansas City Chiefs in their near negative 22 offensive C-score. It is worth noting here that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a very fun offensive C-score this year of negative 8.888. The Bears' average offensive opponent this season checks in at 5.478. It's never really been a fun time to be the Cardinals franchise, but for the Phoenix Cardinals of the early 1990s, it was rougher than usual. Coming in at number 19 is the 1992 edition. They had to play their games in the killer NFC East while being essentially on the West Coast in the state of Arizona. They went 4-12 this season, but it was a competitive 4-12, only getting outscored by 89 points and putting up a pretty good C-score for that record at negative 11.348. The defensive side of the ball was stronger than it was on offense, as they got pretty close to average here with a negative 2.296. And as should be expected, 2 of their 3 hardest opponents this year came from that NFC East: the eventual Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, by the way, they also got to face the San Francisco 49ers, who only had this season's league MVP and the league's greatest wide receiver of all time. Only 2 opponents gave the Cardinals a negative offensive C-score. One of those were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not in their division, but a team they got to play twice, and the other were the Indianapolis Colts, who got to dip into the negative double digits here. Those matchups do help out this score a little bit, but not enough to keep the Cardinals out of the top 20. Their average opponent very close to the 2011 Bears here at 5.481. This is a team we've seen before from a season we've seen before. At number 18 are the 1970 Green Bay Packers. This team faced the single hardest schedule of the entire Super Bowl era and almost went 500 against it at 6-8. They did get outscored by nearly 100 points though and put up a C-score of negative 7.29. On defense, though, they just missed being average, with that C-score coming in at negative 0.375. As we've seen more than once so far on this countdown, Green Bay had two of their three hardest opponents this season from within their division, and just like the Cardinals in the entry before, the third entry was from the 49ers. The Steelers and the Falcons were the only respite for the Packers this season, as they were the only two teams on their schedule with offensive C-scores in the double-digit negatives. These entries have all been tight to this point, and this one's no exception, but we've finally broken the 5.5-point barrier. The Packers' average opponent checks in here at 5.551. Woe be unto the Cardinals. We just saw the 1992 team at number 19. Now at number 17 is the 1991 team. This was a worse unit though. They went 4-12, got outscored by over 9 points per game, and put up a pretty low C-score of negative 17.356. They were stronger on defense though. Not so close to average, but a lot closer than their offense was at negative 3.864. On their schedule this season was their divisional opponents, the single greatest offense to win the Super Bowl, the Washington Redskins. They also had matchups with the very good San Francisco 49ers and the very good, at least offensively, Atlanta Falcons. One opponent from their division does show up on the easy side of things here with the New York Giants, but by far their easiest opponents were the very bad 1991 New England Patriots. The average C-score for the Cardinals here inches forward to 5.582. It was their 10th season of play in the NFL, and to celebrate, the 2004 Jacksonville Jaguars take the number 16 spot on this countdown. They did have a winning record this year, but they were outscored on the season as well. They did manage a positive C-score of 1.406, but this team was heavily tilted toward the defense. Check out that C-score of 13.214, and check out these opponents they had to face. The Indianapolis Colts and the Peyton Manning-led trio of heroes, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the San Diego Chargers, the third hardest opponent they faced, with their C-score at almost 15. They did only face one opponent in the double-digit negatives, but that was the Chicago Bears, who almost got to negative 22. These low-level matchups on the easy side of things help balance things out slightly, giving the Chargers an average offensive opponent this year with a C-score of 5.654. In their dying days as members of the AFC, the Seattle Seahawks of 2000 get the number 15 spot on this countdown. They were only 6-10 this season while getting outscored by nearly 100 points. The strength of schedule helps, but not enough to keep their overall C-score into double-digit negatives at minus 10.356. And this was a worse team on defense than it was on offense, indicated by that defensive C-score of negative 7.547. We've seen some glass cannon teams on this countdown. Well, the hardest opponent for the Seahawks this season was the glassiest of all those teams, the St. Louis Rams, and their offensive C-score of nearly 31. They also have two opponents within their division, the Raiders and the Broncos, whose offensive C-score were almost 20 each. They did have some easier matchups though. The Atlanta Falcons were the easiest of the bunch. Their division rival San Diego Chargers were also pretty easy with their negative double-digit score. Altogether now, this Seahawk team gets us closer to 6 points on average, but they're not quite there, sitting at 5.796. With the Miracle on 33rd Street now firmly behind them, the 1978 Baltimore Colts were instead just a really bad team. They take the number 14 spot on this countdown, and this is a great indicator of how record does not always tell the story. This was a 5-11 team, but they were second worst in points scored and dead last in points allowed. Despite facing the league's hardest schedule, their C-score was still in the dumps at negative 24.036. And the main culprit behind that was that defensive C-score of negative 16.56. Now, we've seen teams face off with harder opponents. The Dallas Cowboys are the hardest one here, and their offensive C-score does not quite hit 20. The difference here is they didn't have a whole lot of bad teams on the easy side of things, with the St. Louis Cardinals the only one underneath -4. So on the whole, their opponents were still difficult, and the average of those opponents come in with an offensive C-score of 5.843. We're now firmly at the halfway point of the countdown with another pretty bad team, the 2000 Atlanta Falcons. They take spot number 13. 2 seasons removed from appearing in the Super Bowl, this team was 4-12, getting outscored by more than 10 points per game and putting up a dreadful C-score of -22.605. The defense was slightly less to blame here than the offense, with that C-score coming in at -9.275. They too, like the Seattle Seahawks from this season, had to face the St. Louis Rams, but they had to face them twice while also matching up with the Oakland Raiders and Denver Broncos. The third easiest opponent here for the Falcons were the New Orleans Saints, a divisional opponent, but their offensive C-score was better than -1. Another matchup with a divisional opponent here, the Carolina Panthers, helps things. In fact, it helped it just enough for the Falcons to miss hitting the 6-point barrier here. Their average opponent will sit at 5.967. A Buccaneers team from the past took the number 1 spot in our easiest slate of offensive opponents, but taking spot number 12 here are the 2009 Tampa Bay Bucks. Another bad team here, 3-13, getting outscored by 156 points. They did face a pretty tough schedule though, helping keep that C-score somewhat mitigated at -16.974. In fact, on defense, their C-score wasn't that bad at all, sitting at -4.512. They had the misfortune of playing against the New Orleans Saints twice. This, of course, was the New Orleans Saints team that went on to win Super Bowl 44. Matchups with the New England Patriots and Philadelphia Eagles contributed here to the overall toughness. They did have 3 separate opponents here in the double-digit negatives with the Seahawks, the Redskins, and the Bills. All that said though, the Buccaneers finally give us our first team with an average opponent higher than 6, if just barely at 6.006. And right next door at number 11 is another team from the same season in the same division. Here we have the Carolina Panthers. This was a much better team than Tampa though. They went 8-8, just slightly outscored their opponents, but their tough strength of schedule pushed forward that C-score to 7.567. Their offense was in the negatives though, as indicated by this defensive C-score of 10.885. The big difference here between the Panthers and the Bucks is that Carolina had to face off with the Minnesota Vikings while Tampa did not. That gets their average opponent higher than Tampa's and closer to 6.1. They check in here at an average opponent of 6.096. Top 10 time now, and kicking this off is the second team we've seen that was 2 years removed from a Super Bowl appearance. This would be the 2004 Oakland Raiders. They went 5-11, didn't get outscored by too many points, -122, while facing the league's second hardest schedule. That helped keep their C-score under control at -12.246. But the defense really let them down here, with this score coming in at -11.244. Part of the reason for that, this incredibly difficult slate of opponents. The Indianapolis Colts show up here, along with the Chiefs and the Chargers showing up twice. Matchups against teams from southern divisions here, the Jaguars, Buccaneers, and Texans help things out, but not enough to keep the Raiders out of the top 10. Their average opponent comes in at a very clean number of 6.1. Here comes that 1970 season again, where the NFC was so much stronger than the AFC. Coming in at number 9 would be that season's Washington Redskins. They were 6-8, they only got outscored by 17 points, which is pretty impressive given the fact that they faced the league's third hardest schedule, which of course still ranks as one of the hardest of the entire Super Bowl era. That would give them a C-score in the positive range of 4.489. On defense though, they sit at below average, -3.718. Just like the Packers from this season that we saw earlier in the countdown, they don't have any dreadfully difficult opponents here, with the Detroit Lions at just over 18 checking in as the hardest. What hurts them here is the lack of very easy opponents. In fact, their third hardest opponent overall were the Cincinnati Bengals, and they managed an offensive C-score of higher than 4. Having to face the Eagles twice helps keep the Redskins from ranking even higher, but they are here at number 9 with an average opponent C-score of 6.161. Taking the number 8 spot here are the 1977 Pittsburgh Steelers. This, of course, is the weak link of the 6-year run the Steelers had between 1974 and 1979, but it's still a season most teams would take. They went 9-5, outscored their opponents by 40 points, and just missed a C-score of 15 at 14.9. The Steel Curtain was a little less steely this season, though, with that C-score coming in at 4.674. A major reason for that, though, was the slate of opponents they faced. The Dallas Cowboys, who went on to win this season's Super Bowl, were over 25, and the Oakland Raiders were almost at 23. Add to that 2 matchups with the double-digit Houston Oilers, and only 1 matchup with a negative double-digit team in the New York Jets, and you get a pretty high average score for their opponents this year. The Steelers come in at 6.309. This was the season that made head coach Mike Ditka believe that only Ricky Williams stood between this team and Super Bowl glory. Taking spot number 7 are the 1998 New Orleans Saints. They certainly were not a player away, sitting at 6-10 with a negative 54-point differential, but they did face what was tied for the league's hardest schedule. That kept their C-score closer to 0 at negative 2.231. And in fact, their defense was above average, sitting at 0.966. Their 3 most difficult opponents this season line up exactly the same with our number 23 entry, their division rival St. Louis Rams. The major difference here that keeps the Saints ranked so much further ahead of the Rams is that New Orleans did not have to play the dreadful Philadelphia Eagles this season. Their third easiest opponents were the Arizona Cardinals, and their C-score only slightly dipped lower than negative 2. Put that all together, and the average offensive opponent for the Saints this season comes in at 6.329. I don't know if the Chargers franchise is the single unluckiest in all the NFL, but they sure have had a lot of unlucky individual seasons. Coming in at number 6 here is no exception, the 1977 team with their 7-7 record. They also outscored their opponents by plus 17 and had a C-score of 7.698. You'd think with all those 7s they would be a little luckier. But that's not the case as far as their offensive opponents go, which helps explain why their defensive C-score was so high at 12.365. They had the Oakland Raiders twice, the Miami Dolphins once, and the Pittsburgh Steelers once. Looking at the easy side of things, their second easiest opponent were the New Orleans Saints, and their offensive C-score was only negative 1.018. The Detroit Lions at negative 11 and change are the only team they faced that were in the double-digit negatives. So in total, the average opponent for this Charger team was 6.493. What's a little bit more misery among friends? At number 5, we have another Charger team, this one from the year 2000. This squad went 1-15, but they're the best 1-15 team you're likely to ever see. They only got outscored by 171 points. Yes, that's a big number, but not so big for a team that only won once. They also faced the league's second hardest schedule and put together a C-score of negative 23.56. They were fairly balanced between offense and defense, but their defense does check in slightly lower at minus 13.447. Like so many other teams that we've seen on this list from the year 2000, they had to face the St. Louis Rams, the Oakland Raiders, and the Denver Broncos. They are more similar to the Seattle Seahawks in that they faced the Raiders and Broncos twice. Only 2 teams on their schedule check in with a C-score of worse than negative 1. One of those were those same Seahawks that they did face twice. So they had a tough slate of opponents, as indicated by their average score of 6.593. We have seen some good teams on this countdown, but coming in at number 4 is by far the best one in the 1977 Denver Broncos. For one thing, they're the only team that made it to the Super Bowl, and for another thing, they have by far the largest C-score at 30.444. They were known as the Orange Crush defense, and this C-score of 23.877 isn't the only thing to prove that. Also proving it is this slate of opponents. They did have a regular season matchup with the Dallas Cowboys, who they went on to face in that season's Super Bowl. They also had 2 matchups with the Oakland Raiders, defending Super Bowl champions. On the easy side of things, they did have 2 matchups in the division with the Chargers and the Chiefs, but those weren't overwhelmingly bad offenses. The only double-digit negative team they faced were the Buffalo Bills. Everything here in the middle, though, that's not seen, was above board. So on the whole, the average offensive opponent for this season's juggernaut Denver Broncos was 6.69. Okay, we're back to bad teams. The 1975 New England Patriots take our number 3 spot. This wasn't a completely terrible team though. They look so at 3-11, getting outscored by 100 points, but they did face a difficult schedule. C-score does spare them here for the most part at negative 13.593. Their defensive C-score was negative 6.697, which was very close to their offensive output. Their toughest opponents here came within the division. 2 against the Buffalo Bills, 2 against the Baltimore Colts, and 1 with the Super Bowl-bound Dallas Cowboys. The Chargers were the only team they faced in double digits at negative 15.11. Everyone else was better than negative 5. This Patriot team at number 3 will break the 7-point barrier with their clean-looking score of 7.1. For the second time on this countdown, we have back-to-back entries from the same season and the same division. Coming in at number 2 are the 1975 New York Jets. Like many other Jets teams, especially from the 1970s, this was a bad team at 3-11 with a negative 175 point differential and a negative 22.452 C-score. And being number 2 on this list does not spare them from a dreadful defensive C-score of negative 19.205. The Jets being in the same division as the Patriots means their opponents are mostly similar except having to face each other, but in favor here, so to speak, for the Jets is that they also had a matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers that the Patriots got to avoid. So they come in higher here. Their average opponent checks in at 7.733. The New York Jets took spot number 2, but taking spot number 1 are the New York Giants from 1983. This was a pretty good team even though they went 3-12-1. They only got outscored by 80 points and their C-score was able to stay in the single-digit negatives at minus 8.633. In fact, their offense was above average, pushing a score of 5 at 4.933. They faced off with the Dallas Cowboys twice and the Washington Redskins twice. Adding up those 2 offensive C-scores gives the Giants opponents of over 100 points in just 4 games. Another matchup with the LA Raiders didn't help things out either. The Kansas City Chiefs were the 3rd toughest opponent for the Giants this year offensively, and their C-score was almost 4 points. The Giants' average opponent this season would probably have hit 10 points or higher if not for 2 matchups with the Eagles. These scores on average have been pretty tight, but the Giants give us a big leap forward. They not only break the 8-point barrier, they're pushing 8.5 points. Their average offensive opponent this season comes in with a C-score of 8.458. It's at this point of the video where we acknowledge teams from the 1982 season that were left out of the countdown. In this case, it's only one team, the Baltimore Colts. We do this for two reasons: only 9 games were played this year, and teams were playing unbalanced schedules. This Colts team did go winless this season, but history has somewhat spared them given the shortened season and the fact that they did pull out a single tie. Let me know your thoughts about all of this. I'm sure you noticed that the same seasons showed up multiple times on this countdown. It does make sense that that would happen though. Some seasons have outliers and some seasons are a little bit more balanced. Was there a different season that you were expecting to see more often? Was there a team that you were expecting to see that you didn't? Was there a team you weren't expecting to see that you did? Sound off on these topics or anything else you may have on your mind down in the comment section below. Just like we did with our last video, we are celebrating the fact that we've hit 5,000 subscribers on this channel. We're going to be commemorating that with a Q&A. If there's any question you have about the channel or me personally, I'd be happy to receive that question in the comments of this video as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and until next time, I hope you have an awesome day.